Ashley, and today I'm going to use this reference photo that I took in Ireland to do a watercolor painting. So this painting is going to be on a 4x6 section of Arches watercolor paper. So this was a full sheet that I trimmed down. So these are some of my smaller pieces. And I'm going to teach you how to complete this from start to finish in a real-time tutorial. So let's flow right into it. We're going to start by sketching out our landscape here. And so I'm just using a mechanical pencil, and I'm just going to generally get in the shapes of the hills, the top of the cliffs. And so I'm just kind of loosely copying my reference photo here to get these shapes. And it doesn't have to be super precise, but this front one is kind of the most important because that's going to be basically our focal point right in here. So we kind of have one coming down this way, and then the cliff comes down into the ocean. Okay, and then we're going to get the second part here, and this is where there's going to be an opening, and we're creating a land bridge here. And it doesn't have to be really precise because we can always edit it while we're painting, but we just want to get some of those basic shapes in. Okay. And then this is going to come up and kind of come off the top of this. And that's going to be another grassy hill all up on the top. And then the top of the hill kind of angles down away toward the bottom here, and it's increasing kind of the sky. So there's going to be a little bit more sky visible on the right side. Okay, so then I'm just going to delineate kind of where the grasses start on these cliffs. So the bottom part's going to be rocky, and then the top is going to be grasses. And here they're kind of maybe mossy, draping down over the side. And then I'm just going to kind of add some more sections of my cliff walls here. And then here's kind of a beach area, but it still has cliffs kind of behind it. I might edit that a little bit. I don't know. Okay, so there's our basic shape. So we are going to have ocean down here, and then our cliffs, and then grass, and then our sky. And this down here is going to have the rocks coming into the water. Okay, so now I'm going to lighten up the sketch just a little bit, just using a kneaded eraser. And I'm just going to kind of lift up some of that extra pencil. And it doesn't have to be super light because I'm going to use, like, over this part, it's going to be pretty dark greens. And a lot of the rocks are going to be gray and browns anyway. But like back here, that's going to be lighter and kind of faded out. So I'm going to lift that up a lot more. And then we're going to get started with our painting. So I'm going to start by doing a wash of a gray color for the sky. And I'm going to use a squirrel hair brush for this. This is a small one. This is size 8 Degato squirrel hair brush. It holds a lot of water even though it's small. And since this is a small paper, that's what I'm going to do. And then I'm going to mix a gray by doing ultramarine and burnt sienna. And that creates a nice gray color. Okay, now I want to bias it a little bit more blue because it is still sky, even though it's a gray sky. Okay, here we go. And then lighten it up. And we're going to put that in for our sky. Kind of doing, not worrying about getting all the way to the edges. It can be a little bit of a vignette. And then I'm going to pull that down into the cliffs and the ocean and just let it bleed out. Okay, add a little bit more blue up into the sky. Okay. Now I'm going to lift some areas just to get some variation and maybe look like there's some clouds in the sky too. And just some texture. Okay. And now I'm going to paint these background hills, the green. So I'm going to use my ultramarine and some yellow and mix a green. It's going to be on the bluish side, and I'm mixing it in a well that is dirty already, so it's got other things in it, but mostly it's going to be that ultramarine and the lemon yellow deep. And I'm just going to kind of touch that onto the top of these hills. And it's going to bleed out because it's all wet right now, and that's okay. Okay, add a little bit more yellow as we come to the middle ones, because those are going to be a brighter yellow, or brighter green, yellowish green. And so now I'm just kind of blocking in the colors. It's a very watery mix, so it's a nice pale wash. So we can go over it later, but this is just getting some of the basic shapes in to start with. Okay. And then I'm going to add a little bit more blue. To get a darker green again. And it's a little bit thicker too, and we're going to add that in to these front ones. Okay. And then I'm going to add some browns and grays. So this is going to be my burnt sienna and my burnt sienna and my French ultramarine blue. And we're going to add that in to the cliffs. Just to get some base color on there. Okay, and then a sandy color, so a little bit more burnt sienna. But again, it's still super pale, so I'll go in and make it darker later. Okay, now for the water, I'm going to use more of the ultramarine to make it bluer. And then I'm going to put a little bit of my yellow to make it a slightly turquoisey color, greenish color for the water. Okay, so it's a grayish blue, but it's got a tiny bit of green in it. And I want to make sure that I'm not putting this in full coverage. Because there's going to be the white, like sparkling of splashes and the sun glinting off, glistening on the water. So now we're going to let that layer dry, and then we'll come back and work on the next layer when it's completely dry. So now that that first layer is done, I'm going to switch to a more snappy brush. This doesn't hold as much water. This is a size 10 Degato round, and I'm going to start working on the cliffs and the hills a little bit more. So I'm just going to add a little bit more to the back here, just to kind of define the edge a little bit. And then since the paper is now dry, it's not going to bleed out at all up into the sky. So I'll get a defined edge at the top now. And as I come down this direction, it's going to be in shadow, because the top of the hill is where the sun's striking, and this side is in shadow. So I'm adding more blue into that area. And then I'm going to mix some gray, like a brownish gray here, to get some rocks and stuff maybe poking through there. Okay. And so I'm just adding different amounts of blue and yellow to it to vary that color of green. Adding a little bit of burnt sienna to get some more neutrals in there. And so I'm just adding a little bit of brown to the edge here, and that's just to distinguish this front hill from the back one since they're nearly the same color. I just want to add a little bit of definition there. And then just working my way back now, and I'm going to start lightening up the mix to make it more watery. Lifting up some here just because it got a little bit more intense than I wanted it to for that area. Now I'm going to add my cliffs in. So again, I'm going to start on the back, and it's going to be a very pale wash of a grayish brown. So it's mostly burnt sienna, just a little bit of the ultramarine, and then not very much of it. And then I'm going to do some vertical dry brushing. So I have my brush held very flat to the page. It has very little water on it, very little pigment, and I'm just dragging it lightly up the page. At the end here, I'm just going to define that edge just a little bit. And then I'll add a little bit of shadows in. So let me get a little bit more of the blue. And then I'm going to put in some little shadows with that blue. Little archway there. And there's just some shadows up in the cliff walls. Little bit of shadows in these back ones too. Not much. Tiny bit. Okay. And then a little bit of rocks coming out into the water. So I'm just dotting that in basically in that darker shadow gray color. Okay. And then kind of the same thing as I come forward. So I'm using some of the brown, and this area maybe is going to be more of horizontal streaks instead of vertical. Okay. And then some of the gray for some shadow as well. And then just as I'm working my way forward, I'm getting a little bit more detailed with each layer. So I still don't want to be crazy detailed, but I'm adding a little bit more detail as I go. Yeah. Soften that a little bit, so I'm going to take some clean water and just brush it over, and that'll blend out just a little bit to make it a softer layer there. Okay. And by doing this, I'm leaving a lot of white space in these cliffs where the rocks are weathered and have lost color over time. So these cliffs have a lot of white in them. And I am loosely looking at my reference photo for some of the coloring and some of the patterns on the rocks, but I'm also just kind of making it up as I go. So it's not photorealistic or anything by any means. And here's that little land bridge. And again, this is kind of the focal point, so I want this to be a little bit more detailed than some of the other areas. Building up the shadow here where we can see the underside of that land bridge. Okay, get some of those kind of striations in for those layers of rock. Again, just not very much water or pigment on the brush here. Okay. Getting a little bit more shadow. Okay, now this background area is the cliff behind it, and so I do want that to have the brown, but I don't want it to be as detailed or anything as the area in front of it that I just did. So I'm just going to leave it at that. So this is just a lot of repetition of techniques. So lots of dry brushing. I'm varying the angles with vertical and horizontal. I'm not doing any like diagonals really because these cliffs, I want to get the impression that they're straight up and down. So if I did diagonal, they would look more angled. And then just adding a little bit of darkness around the bottom of them. Where there'd be some more shadows and kind of grounding it that way. A little bit more green. To this one up here. Because it was just too straight across, I want it to kind of dot down. There we go. Okay. Now I'm going to work on the ocean. So I want to make sure that I'm leaving some white space around where the cliffs are entering the water, because water would be kind of splashing up onto those just a little bit. So I'm just kind of making these edges jagged. And leaving a little bit of space so that it looks like there's some water. Okay. We're putting some dark shadows in now. Kind of, this is our layer that's going to really make it pop with these dark shadows. Deepening up some of the shadows on the inside of my land bridge here. Again, adding these darkest darks is what's really going to make it pop. So don't want to kind of skip this step. Okay. Now, as I go back, I don't want the shadows to be as dark. So I'm still adding shadow, but I'm adding a little bit more water to them. Okay. Now for this beach back here, I'm just going to add a little bit of a yellow ochre color, and it's really subtle. There we go. Just kind of a subtle glow of the beach there. And now for the water, again, I'm going to mix my ultramarine with some yellow to get a turquoisey color. And then I'm going to add a touch of burnt sienna to gray it out. Maybe a little bit too much gray. There we go. And then making sure that there's not a ton of water on my brush, I'm going to dry brush that in over the water. Okay. And some areas I am going to kind of do swoopy motions to get a little bit of a swirling effect. Okay, and then, but that's basically it. I'm just dry brushing over the water. Making sure as I get farther back that I have less pigment on my brush, because I want that to be a lot more faded out. And I want the front to be a lot darker. Okay, now I'm actually going to take some of that on the tip of my brush and tap it around so that it looks like there's some water coming up and then splashing instead of just open white spaces here. So you would kind of have shadows under where those splashes are happening. Again, this part I want to be a lot more pigmented, more dense, less lights hitting here. And in here, there's kind of a reflection of this land bridge. So I'm just dry brushing that in to get a reflection. So you don't want it to be solid because it's still water. Okay. There we go. Okay, it's really textured and I'm okay with that. If you don't like that much texture, go over it with a damp brush to just get a little bit of that blended out. But I like the texture. That's one of the benefits of using a rougher watercolor paper is you get more texture, and I like that. This is a cold press still, but it's a nice toothy cold press. So I'm just kind of blending some of that out because I want this area, the focal point, to be the most textured. So I'm blending some of this farther out part out. Okay, so now I'm going to take a second and then decide if I want to add anything else. And So this is where I just kind of pause and step back and look at it. I'm not super happy with this hill right here, so I'm probably gonna mess with that a little bit. I gotta decide what I wanna do though. Let me see if I can lift out a little bit. There we go. Okay, I'm gonna add a little bit more of my more yellowish green to the top here. Okay. And then tap in a little bit of shadow. There we go. I think that's a little bit better. Okay, yep, I like that better. Now I have to decide if I want to add any more darks in. I like the dark of this archway a lot, and I don't know that I need to add a ton more of the dark grays, but I'm thinking a little bit more darker green would be good. So I'm going to mix up a darker green. So I added a little bit of yellow ochre to it too. And then I'm going to add that. And kind of edit the shape of this hill a little bit. Okay. There we go. Just gonna add a little bit more depth to the green there. All right, and that's it. So I'm just gonna sign it, and then that'll be my painting of the Irish cliffs with the land bridge. All right, so once again, here is that completed painting of the Irish cliffs with the land bridge. I really like this painting and I like some of the contrasts that I got, and I love Ireland, so painting Ireland is one of my favorite subjects. I really hope you enjoyed this painting. If you did, give the video a thumbs up. I would really appreciate it. It'd help out the video. And check out my channel for tons more content with other real-time tutorials and a bunch of informational content as well. Again, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, keep those paints flowing.